Hello everyone and welcome to the Q&A for Awaken Through Writing. Find your authentic voice and reveal a clear vision for your future. I'm Carrie Hernandez with the Shift Network, and it is my pleasure to be your host as we explore the teachings of Mark Matousek and address questions about his upcoming course, which begins on Tuesday, October 22nd at 1 p.m. Pacific. And if you're unable to join us live, you can still participate in this course, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. But first, I want to introduce my guest. Mark Matousek is the author of two acclaimed memoirs, Sex, Death, Enlightenment, A True Story, and The Boy He Left Behind, A Man's Search for His Lost Father, as well as Writing to Awaken, A Journey of Truth, Transformation, and Self-Discovery. He is a former editor at Interview Magazine and a featured blogger for PsychologyToday.com and HuffPost, and has contributed to numerous publications, including The New Yorker, the Oprah Winfrey Magazine, and many others. And as a founding member of V Men, an organization devoted to ending violence against women and girls, Mark curates the V Men Essay Series, which is an ongoing anthology featuring personal writings by men on the subject of violence against women. Please join me in welcoming Mark, who is going to lead us in an opening practice. Mark, it is so great to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Carrie. It's great to see you again. So before we begin, we're just going to do an 8-minute writing exercise. So if you please just find a paper and pen or pencil, or of course you can use your keyboard if you prefer. This is going to give you a taste of the kind of practice we're going to be doing in this class and why it's so transformative. I'd like you please to take 8 minutes now to write about what you want to change in your life today, something important that you want to change in your life today and why it matters to you. The why is as important as the thing itself. We're going to take 8 minutes to do that, please, and then we'll come back together as a group. Five more minutes, please. Why this change matters to you and the stories that may be blocking you from moving toward this change. More minutes, please. One more minute. Let's start to finish up, please. And let's come back together as a group. Welcome back. So just put the writing aside for the moment. How was this for you identifying an important change that you want to make in your life and the reasons why this is so powerful for you? When we get specific in writing, it unleashes creative imagination. It unleashes the will, the motivation to move forward. Because the stories we tell ourselves so often block us without our questioning whether they are true or not. So, what writing does is it allows us to put the truth down on paper as we know it in that moment, and get clear on what's going on inside us. Until we do that, until we begin to question our thoughts and stories, of course, we are prisoner of the limited ways that we have of seeing ourselves in our lives. So that's what I wanted to do, Carrie, before we began our question and answer.
Thank you so much, Mark. I was writing and doing the exercise myself. I'm like, oh, now time to focus here. So let's go ahead and get started. But thank you for that great exercise. All right, everyone. We're going to spend the rest of our time together exploring questions for Mark as we prepare for his video course, Awaken Through Writing. And the course begins on Tuesday, October 22nd at 1 p.m. Pacific. And you can visit our website, which is awakenthroughwriting.com. awakenthroughwriting.com. One more time, that's awakenthroughwriting.com to learn more about this 7-module course and find a link to register. Alrighty, let's get started with the questions. And a big thank you to all of you who sent questions in ahead of time through our webcast. And for those of you joining us live, please go ahead and type in your questions into the chat, and I'm happy to read those aloud. All right, our first question is, what kind of writing will you work with in this class? Is this a stream of consciousness type of writing?
No, it's not. And I'm glad that the questioner asked that. This is not morning pages. This is not automatic writing. This isn't free writing. This is writing for self-inquiry. It's very particular approach to writing. We use targeted questions to explore critical issues in our lives and places where we may be confusing to ourselves or where we feel blocked in order to move through to clearer insight. You know, as I say that when you tell the truth, your story changes. And when your story changes, your life is transformed. But that begins by telling the truth. And that's the objective of this writing. It's not just observational writing. It's not about the quality of the prose. It's about the courage that you bring, the risks that you bring, and your willingness to peel back the layers and tell the untold story, what Dorothy Allison used to call the scary story. Say the things on paper that you don't allow yourself to say in life. That's the therapeutic value of it, and that's, of course, where the insight and transformation come from. So this is about asking yourself deep questions and exploring as much as you can in that moment, understanding that the questions go on and on. Questions will lead to other questions, and of course, that's why it's a spiritual practice, because it continues to open up into new lines of inquiry. Thank you for that.
Thank you. All right, our next question is from Rosalind asking, how can I use my lived experiences, my true self, to tell my story in a way that another person could be inspired or transformed?
That's a great question, Rosalind. The way to do that is by being as personal, as candid, as daring, as open and transparent as you possibly can be. The way that we communicate our deepest stories is by being as specific as possible. One of the misunderstandings that a lot of memoir writers get into is feeling like they need to generalize their experience in order for other people to understand it. But in fact, exactly the opposite is true. The more faithful you are to the particulars, the unique details of your own experience, the more reach it's going to have to more people. When I wrote my first memoir, I was very worried that people who weren't on a spiritual path or who hadn't worked in publishing, et cetera, wouldn't understand what I had gone through. And I was amazed by how many people from very, very different walks of life touched in very deeply with my experience because I was honest, brutally honest. And when you do that, you give the reader courage as well. And that's part of what we do as writers, is we communicate the willingness to explore ourselves honestly and to be true, to tell the truth, which is, of course, what all spiritual practice and all philosophy is about. So go as deeply as you can, Rosalind, into the uniqueness and the oddities of your own story. That's what's going to reach out to other people and draw them into your experience.
Beautiful. All right, our next question is from Karen asking, does this course help if you want to become a professional writer?
Karen, this is not a course in becoming a professional writer. This is a course in learning to explore and put our deep experience, our inner life, into words and on paper. So in that sense, it's very helpful for folks who are professional writers because it gives us access to our deep materials. You know, I have many novelists who take my Writing for Insight courses because it gives them insight into not only themselves, but into the narrator of their books, into the characters of their books. So the more insight we have, the more insight we bring to the page. And that's what matters. If there's no insight in the writer, there won't be any insight in the reader. So what Writing to Awaken does is brings insight by showing us in black and white what's going on in our own minds, which is often a big surprise. I can't tell you how many folks are surprised that when they start to do this writing by who they are, who they reveal themselves to be on the page, and that can be a surprise. That can sometimes be a challenge, but it's always liberating. It always leads to more freedom. So in that way, it's extremely useful for people who are professional writers who aspire to publish, because it's going to bring more clarity, more depth, and more truthfulness to your work, which is always a good thing. Yeah. Thank you, Karen.
Our next question asks, can writing actually help me make changes in my life?
In fact, it does. And that's why I began with that exercise. Because until we are clear about what we want, it's very hard to substantiate an intention that leads to motivation and completion. So the first thing is to be as clear as we possibly can be. And that can be a challenge, because once you write something down, you can't take it back. The problem for a lot of us when it comes to fulfilling desires or manifesting what we want in our lives is the fear that if we write it down, we're going to have to follow through. That once you ring a bell, you can't unring it. And so that's the power of putting it into words. It becomes an intention-setting device, you could say. And that's what we're going to be doing in this class, is going to our deep intentions and changes that we want to make moving into the future, particularly during this confusing time when a lot of us have been thrown off our expectations, completely. Our plans have been blown out of the water, and a lot of folks are confused. Who am I now? What does my life mean to me now? What can I expect? Where am I headed? What are my aspirations? What no longer matters to me that mattered before this pandemic? And is really important to me now. So that's what the writing will help to do, is get clear on motivation, desire, and intention. So thank you for that.
All right. Our next question asks, will you be looking over our writing or giving us guidance on our style of writing?
I will not be. No, there will be a group where you can post your writing. I will be looking at some of the writing. I will be available by email to answer questions about the writing. I won't have a chance to read a lot of pages because there will be quite a few folks in the class, and that's not the format of this class. But I will be overseeing the place where folks are posting their writing. And if you have a specific question, if you wanted to send me a paragraph, let's say, and say, does this tone work? Is this clear? What do you see? I'd be more than happy to help you with that.
Great. All right. Thanks for that clarity. And our next question is asking a little more information on how much time a week or a day should we plan on spending on writing during our class?
That's a great question. I don't recommend spending more than 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week to begin with on writing. You'd be amazed what you can do in a half hour when you put the world outside, you close the door, and you focus. So I don't recommend saying I'm going to sit down for 2 hours a day, because you won't be able to fulfill that. It will be a letdown, and then you'll feel discouraged. So I recommend 20 to 30 minutes a day of focused writing. And then if you feel drawn to revisit it later in the day to notice what you may have left out or what you would like to go deeper with, absolutely do that. But it's not a huge time commitment. It's a commitment of intention and the desire to learn and the desire to understand yourself, the desire to touch into your deep potential and move beyond the fear that keeps you stuck, which is the case for all of us. Fear so often goes unquestioned, and the more it goes unquestioned, the bigger it seems to get. So one of the big things that we do with this writing is question where we feel resistance, question where we feel blocked, where is the fear, because that contains a lot of information. It shows you where healing is needed, And it can also surprise you by what is revealed. You may be interested in things that you're not even aware of. There may be aspects of your life that are irking you or dragging you down or creating inauthenticity that you're not even clear about. And so what this writing does is in 20 or 30 minutes a day, I think of it as emotional and spiritual hygiene. It's a bit like brushing your teeth. So if you give 20 or 30 minutes a day to your emotional and spiritual hygiene by illuminating what's going on with you and becoming your own witness, it is both a spiritual practice and a psychological motivator. So which is the power of writing to awaken.
Thank you. And that's doable. 20 or 30 minutes a day, that's doable. And I like it for our emotional hygiene. Thanks. Thank you, Mark. All right. Our next question is from Margie, and I believe she's referencing to either her prompt or an answer you had just given us. She asks, how far back in your life would you go to start? I think on the point of writing. Do you have any clarity for her on that?
Margie, that's a good question, and it's a complex question. I often do an exercise with students around the mother's gaze and what you remember of the mother's gaze, your earliest memories of that connection that you had with your mother or your primary caregiver, because that tells us an awful lot about our emotional patterns, how we bond, how we attach or don't attach in love. We learn love and empathy from our primary caregiver, and the degree to which you get those lessons has a lot to do with success later in life, as well as psychological balance and well-being. So when we describe that experience in writing, harking back to that relationship, you're doing it from the present moment. So it's not about diving back there and getting lost in the past. It's about observing the past through the lens of who you are today. Right? So in a way, you could say you go back to the beginning, and in a way, you could say you're always present. Remember, all recollection, all retrospect happens in the present moment. And that's something very important to keep in mind, particularly when you're writing about hard things. And most of us have had hard things, challenges, pain in our early life. And we think, well, gosh, I've spent all these years evolving and moving past that. Why would I want to go back and look at that? The reason is that through the lens of who you are today, you will see many things about yourself that you weren't able to ascertain at the time, and which you may not have connected the dots around. For example, let's say that you did the mother's gaze exercise and you realize that you never felt seen by your primary caregiver. That's unfortunately a very common experience. That will give you insight into how you bond with others. Are you able to trust? Can you allow space in relationships? What about self-esteem? You'd be amazed by how many life qualities derive from that essential connection with the primary caregiver. And if you have no recollection of that, that is also important information. So that's a long answer to your question to say we go back to the beginning, but we stay in the present.
Wonderful. Thank you for that clarity. Okay, our next question asks, is the type of writing we're going to do more like memoir writing?
Well, writing memoir is a narrative form. So we're not going to be focusing so much on a cohesive narrative in this writing as we are shining the spotlight of insight into ourselves and understanding the narratives that we carry with us. Writing memoir is a unique and a particular craft. And it has to do, as I was saying earlier, with universalizing, getting to the universal at the depths of your own personal experience in order to communicate to others. That's actually it's a different skill than what we're going to be doing in this class. This is about knowing ourselves. Until that happens, no one else can know us, nor are we likely to know other people because we'll be strangers to ourselves. So this is about wiping the dust off the lens of self-perception in order to communicate better with others, not only in writing, but also in our actual lives. So it does help with memoir because we come to understand who we are and how we became who we are and what we do with the narratives in our mind. But it won't be about polishing memoir, which is a long, laborious, wonderful, but very difficult and different skill from what we'll be doing in Awaken Through Writing.
Our next question is from Olga, asking, do you also recommend to write a message to somebody, to write something that I can't say aloud?
That's very effective, Olga. Absolutely. And I advise people to do that very often. If somebody is in a course where they're writing about a relationship that's like a roadblock in their lives, I'll often recommend that they write something to that person. It doesn't need to be sent. It's about expressing it. It's about moving it from unconscious and subconscious into consciousness awareness by bringing it into objective reality with writing. So that will that's the way that works. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Our next question asks, is this solo writing or will we be having partners? Can you let us know how this will work for us in the course?
Sure. And it is solo writing in that you're doing it on your own, but there will be breakout groups at the end of each class. And there's going to be the opportunity for folks to partner up, to have buddies going through the class if they so choose. Lots of people like to have that kind of support, but these aren't critique groups. This is about supporting one another, encouraging, giving people a sense of what we see. But we're not here to give one another advice. We're here to witness one another and encourage one another on this path of awakening. But absolutely, it's really helpful to have someone that you know is there. If for no other reason, to be able to write and say, I'm having a hard time writing today. I don't know what it is. Just being able to say that and know that it's being received can release the block itself, because so much blockage comes from a feeling of isolation, a feeling of being sort of turned in on yourself and not knowing which way to go. And that's why it's so important to keep communicating during a course like this. So yes, I highly recommend finding a buddy and participating in the breakout sessions, because that's where a lot of the insight is going to come from for you.
Thank you for sharing that, Mark. I can't help but to think that right now, when we're feeling even more isolated in our homes or in our lives, how important this piece can be in the course, to have the breakout, to have that opportunity for reflection and conversation with another.
It's hugely important, Carrie, because a lot of people, like you say, are suffering from feelings of alienation, being shut in, being cut off. Loss is an enormous issue for a lot of people right now. So it's important that we're there for one another to help each other during this difficult time. That's why I wanted to do this class, because we need one another now more than ever. We need wisdom minds and wisdom eyes and wisdom ears in our lives to support us with so much uncertainty and danger and fear. Connection is often the antidote to fear. And that's my hope for this class. It's going to give people a chance to know that they're part of a population, part of a tribe of seekers, people who are together, moving toward personal growth and the truth. So that's the beauty of the group experience, Carrie.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing that very important piece. I want to let everyone know that we are here with Mark Matousek learning about his course, Awaken Through Writing, which begins on Tuesday, October 22nd. And you can log on to awakenthroughwriting.com for all the details and to register. And I'm going to move on to our next question. Our next question shares, I've taken your writing as a spiritual practice course in the past, and I loved it. Is this going to be different?
Yes, because this time is so different from when I taught the class. This is going to be much more directed at what we can do in our lives now, and the specific kinds of changes that are coming up in this pandemic and in this time of great uncertainty. So the writing and spiritual practice class was much more general. This is going to be more focused on creating the life that we want, getting clear on where we're moving, and what we want to bring to these precious years that we have. We can't be waiting for the world to figure itself out before we learn to be happy, before we connect more deeply with our creativity. We need to do that at the same time that this situation is going on. So what this class is going to do, I hope, is give people tools to not only touch into their deep creativity, but to become their own witness, their own guide, so that at any time they can turn to the page and figure out what's going on with themselves. It doesn't always have to be a therapist appointment. You don't always have to, call a priest. Sometimes you can turn to yourself, because the truth is we know much, much more than we give ourselves credit for. And that's what writing reveals. And that's the beauty of it. That's what's exciting about it. We know more than we know that we know on a conscious level. And what writing does is enables us to get underneath that surface and become empowered by what we discover there. So this will have some of the same the writing practice itself, the fundamental practice of using questions for self-inquiry will be the same, but otherwise the content will be quite different.
All right. So Marianne asks to that, will we be getting guidelines for what to focus on during the weeks or in between sessions?
Yes, absolutely, Marianne. You'll be getting deepening prompts after each class that you'll be able to work on in between sessions. Yeah, that's very important. It's important to have momentum. It's important to have continuity and to keep the practice going. So you'll be getting 3 deepening prompts that will certainly carry you through to the next session.
Great. Our next question is from, I believe, Dridgen, asking if you have already done a lot of work of underlaying your identity and bringing awareness to your habits, beliefs, judgments, etc. And if you've come to a major realization around this, will this course help bring those realizations into some format that will take your message to a greater audience?
If that's your desire, if your desire is to bring your message to a greater audience, then it certainly will do that. No matter how much work we've done on ourselves, there's always more to discover. And that's not just a cliche, that's really the truth. Because how something impacts you today is not how it impacted you when you had the realization, a few months back. That's how we stay present with ourselves and present with our practice. So the insights that you've had, the understandings, the patterns you've connected will all help you go deeper with the lessons in this class in the name of manifestation and realization. Right? This is about creating the life that we want to live and becoming the people we actually are. And no amount of preparation ends that process completely. There's always deeper to go, and that's a lot of people who do these classes, and certainly folks with the Shift Network are very familiar with self-awareness practices. A lot of you have done lots of different things. This is different, and you can bring what you've learned out there to this to great benefit.
Our next question is from Marcia. Hi, Mark. I'm trying to assess whether your class is appropriate for me. I'm a metastatic cancer patient on medication that is currently controlling the disease. My restricted energy is spent trying to prepare for my death in terms of spiritual and practical matters, and trying to accept, embrace, and enjoy the life I have. Often I feel overwhelmed and not doing either of those very well. Do you think your course would be helpful for a person in my situation? If so, how? Thank you so much.
Sure, Marcia, absolutely. The answer is yes. Writing has tremendous therapeutic and healing effects. I myself have dealt with a chronic illness for many years, and I've written myself through a lot of scary moments, a lot of uncertainty, panic. Panic has a hard time standing up on the page. So what I learned, Marcia, is that when you question the panic, when you question the fear, when you look at what's the obstacle that tells you something is impossible, you'd be amazed at what kinds of clarity you can find. So this can be very, very helpful for folks going through a health challenge, for example, or any kind of incipient loss or threat. In moments of threat, it can feel like we're backed in a corner. And what writing does is it opens the windows. It shows us that we're not backed in a corner. We can still know ourselves. We can still ask ourselves questions. As long as we have breath to breathe, we can continue to ask ourselves who we are and get to know the depths of our experience, which is where the richness of life comes from, regardless of where we are on the living and dying spectrum. So it certainly can, Marcia. I have a book called When You're Falling, Dive that might interest you. It's interviews with a lot of people and my own stories around living in extremis. And a lot of it has to do with how writing enabled me to move through those times and has helped some of the people I spoke to who have gone through just the most extraordinary things and found that self-awareness became their life raft in the rapids of crisis. So I hope you're able to join us, Marcia. Be well.
Thank you for that. All right, we do have time for some more questions, but before we take those, I want to share a few details about this course, Awaken Through Writing. You can join Mark for this 7-week journey where he's going to guide you on how to use writing as an effective tool for deeper awakening and personal reckoning. The 7-module course takes place on Thursdays, and I might have misspoken earlier, so please, it is on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, starting on October 22nd. And you'll receive audio and video replays, transcripts, and all other materials that are generated, course-related materials, through our course homepage. Also, I'd like to remind you that we do offer a no-risk money-back guarantee on our courses, and we give a full 2 weeks until November 5th to make sure you absolutely love it. And as an added option, all participants are welcome to connect on a private community group that we do host on Facebook. It's a wonderful way to stay connected with one another and share in your writing journey. Everyone who registers receives the Awaken Through Writing bonus collection. And I'd love to share a little bit. It's a great bonus, has so many pieces in it. So let me tell you what they are. They're The Spirit of Creativity. This is an audio dialogue with Mark Matousek and Mark Nepo, as well as an excerpt from Writing to Awaken, A Journey of Truth, Transformation, and Self-Discovery. This is a PDF introduction to Mark's book. Sex, Death, Enlightenment, A True Story, an audiobook read by Mark, as well as Writing, Spirit, and Telling the Truth. This is an audio dialogue with Mark Matousek and Eve Esdler. And when you register by midnight Pacific, October 16th, you're going to receive, and this is what Mark just mentioned, When You're Falling, Dive, an audiobook read by Mark. So again, if you're able to register by October 16th, an added gift of When You're Falling, Dive. And so I want to let you know that that is an additional registration bonus for October 16th. Okay, everyone, thanks. I wanted to make sure I got all those questions out. Let's go to our information. Let me go to our next question. And this is from Linda. And she shares, over the last few years, I find more often than not, people ask questions for advice without truly seeming to want the answer. And when in the written form of email or text, when either is received, it often can be feel wrong, but it seems to hold so much power in the written word, confirming that we express ourselves differently when we write instead of when we speak. And language and choice of words as an art form, I think, have more to learn. I have more to learn for sure. My question is this a course that will lend itself to creating a new and rather effective way to engage without offending or sounding righteous to another person who really isn't looking for an answer? I'd like to know what you think on this and how the class might support me.
Sure, Linda. That's a great question. And the simplest answer is that by being more clear within yourself about what you want to say, why you want to say it, where anger may be, or where hurt or grief may be, you are less likely to communicate that unconsciously in the writing and get results that you're not looking for. So when we understand our own motivation, when we understand our intention, then we can express it to another person without blame and without too much of ourselves in it, getting our egos out of the way. And that's what writing helps us to do, to get clear on what the truth is, regardless of the stories that we tell ourselves, in order that we can be more effective in the world, personally and in our communication with others. So by learning to put your thoughts and feelings candidly, simply, transparently down on paper, it's going to help you communicate with other people as well. Also, you probably know, once you've written something and you look at it on the page, many things are apparent to you that might not have been if they were just rolling around in your head. So that's the beauty of this. Once you can't be clear with someone else if you're not clear with yourself, and that's where it has to start, and that's what this class will help you do.
Thank you so much. Our next question asks, I currently journal quite a bit, but I find that I get distracted or stuck very easily, and I'm concerned about this in taking the class. Can you give me some guidance, or will there be encouragement for these points when I get stuck?
Yes, there will definitely be encouragements because you're not alone. A lot of people get stuck with the writing. And the way to move through stuckness, the way to move through discouragement is to question it. What is the nature of your discouragement? What are you afraid of? What does this remind you of that brings up discomfort? Right? When you get clear on that, then as I was just saying, it enables you to move forward with more courage. So I'll be talking a lot about resistance. I'll be talking a lot about so-called writer's block and how we can challenge those conditions in our lives instead of just accepting them passively, which a lot of folks tend to do. People who don't have a lot of experience with writing may sit down, find that it's hard to find the words, and turn away from it and never go back. Instead of seeing that this is an opportunity to confront that part of you that is mute or that doesn't, or that is confused, that doesn't understand, and move through it. Instead of just sort of taking no for an answer, so to speak, and saying, well, I can't do it. Right. Many, many people have come to my classes saying that they couldn't express themselves in writing and ended up taking many courses because once you find your voice, you want to keep using it. It becomes irrepressible. There's such a beauty to expressing ourselves and sharing what's true for ourselves with other people. It creates an intimacy that can otherwise be lacking in our lives. So we will certainly be looking at resistance and the reasons that we turn away from writing and what we can learn from our own obstacles, those blocks. because they're often connected to larger issues in our lives, other subjects that may not have to do with writing specifically, but share a common source of insecurity, self-doubt, grandiosity. Very often people stop writing because it's not as good as they think it should be. All right, so it enables us to get humble and get real with who we are, what we're capable of, and what's going on with us, and that tends to shrink the fear of the writing itself. So don't worry about getting stuck. We'll be there to help you.
Wonderful. This is a bit of a follow-up, it seems, question. This is from Kim saying, I don't think of myself as a writer, but I'm drawn to the idea of writing. Can you talk about how to overcome my fear of writing?
Yes, Kim. And that's also pretty common. People want to have written a book, but they don't necessarily want to write the book. They're very different. They're very different experiences. So the question is, how much do you actually want to write? What do you want to write? Why do you want to write? That's what's going to help you distinguish between your idea of writing and what it actually feels like. All right, they're very, very different. We have a lot of baggage and a lot of labels connected to what we think being a writer is, and they're all wrong. They're all wrong. There's many ways to be a writer as there are people on the planet. So you may find that your way of writing is to do it every other day, or to work for a lot of hours one day and then wait for a week. You'll find your own rhythm. And we all have our own creative animal. We all have our own muse, and that's going to become clear to you as you do this work. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Pam is asking, do you think there is a difference between writing on pen and paper versus on a computer or a device?
Pam, this is such a good idea, such a good question, and it's asked a lot. I do think that there is. And I find for myself that when I journal, I prefer to write by hand, but that's not a hard and fast rule. There are times if I'm on the road, I'll work on a keyboard, and you can say more in less time. It has its own kinds of advantages. There's an intimacy with the paper, and seeing the words come through a pen or a pencil, through our hand, through our eye, through our hand onto the page, it has a healing effect. It feels very connected, very embodied. So doing this writing, I would recommend doing it by hand, but that's not mandatory at all. If you're more comfortable writing on a keyboard, if your handwriting is illegible, then by all means type. You'll come to most of the same material, but the experience of doing it will be somewhat different.
Thank you for that. I'm thinking I love the smell of paper and getting the nub on my hand and feeling that. So I'm with you.
And other people, for other people, Carrie, it's just too slow. In this age when we're so used to typing, it's just too slow. So it feels too tedious to sit with a journal or a piece of paper. And for those people, I say, by all means, type. It doesn't matter. It's secondary.
Good to know. Unique for each individual. Absolutely. All right. Yes. Our next question is from Jen asking, this was in relation to an earlier question, saying, what about the opposite? She shares, I feel like I can write in circles endlessly. How do I learn to become more succinct, to get to the point? I feel like I get tired of writing before I reach my breakthrough moments.
Yeah, Jen, and that's what this writing is for. That's why I developed this practice of targeted writing for insight. It will help you stay focused and pursue a question all the way to the end, instead of digressing or getting caught in tangents or just feeling like you're writing from a superficial place. Very often when we're writing automatically, although things can certainly show up, and it can be pleasurable to do, we don't tend to go as deep. It's the focus that takes us deep. It's like the axe of a spelunker, moving into a cave. You need that axe, and you need the light to go deeper. You don't just plunge in. So this writing comes from a more introspective and philosophical place, you could say, because it's really aimed at getting at the truth. So that will help you to write more succinctly, because you'll notice when you've gone off track, and it has nothing to do with the question that you started out wanting to ask. It's a great discipline for that. Thanks for that.
Thank you so much, Mark. This has been so exciting to be in conversation with you about your course. And I'm curious, what are you most looking forward to sharing in this class with those who choose to take the journey with you?
I'm really interested in helping folks understand, as I have been understanding, the nature of paradox, and the fact that every experience, including all the difficult things that are going on in the world today, has another side to it. There's something else is also true. And what writing helps us do is get to a different perspective. And that's what people need more than anything these days, is a new angle of vision, a new way of looking at things. It doesn't feel stuck. You don't feel like you're behind the eight ball. You don't feel like you're at the effect or powerless over these major occurrences in the world. Instead, there's a sense of agency when you can use your imagination and your insight to find new ways forward. So that's the purpose of this course, is to help people find a new way forward and create a vision of their life as they see it, with all of what's going on in consideration as well. The Stoics used to talk about turning the obstacle upside down, and that's what writing helps you do. You take the obstacle and you turn it upside down, and you look at it and see what's the potential here, and that's what I want to help folks develop the ability to find for themselves. After the course is over, it's going to help folks develop a way of seeing, a way of approaching problems, and being agents in their lives instead of feeling like victims, which is a very common feeling for a lot of people these days. So we want to move beyond victim. We want to move toward being the agent of our own experience, in order to give us courage. It gives us stability, and it also gives us vision, which is something that we sorely need.
Thank you so much. Mark, I was thinking about earlier when you and I were talking, we were talking about structure and the idea of structure to help us move our work forward. And in that, you were just now relaying that this class will perhaps serve as that structure to moving forward beyond in the future one. And I love that idea and the notion that we can come to this place of learning the structure that you're offering here.
Yeah. Well, as we were saying earlier, the muse has to be invited. The muse doesn't often just show up. She has to have a structure. There needs to be an invitation, an opportunity for the muse to show up. And that's what writing is. It's a container for the imagination. It's a container for the visionary part of oneself. And if we don't have a place to put it, so often our best inspirations just dissipate. This helps us to annotate our lives and make sure that we don't waste the inspirations that we do have. Momentum can't happen in life or in writing without a structure either. So what a practice does is it creates a wisdom structure for us to keep showing up. And then the writing takes on a life of its own. And that's the beauty of it. People are surprised by how quickly they develop this knack for self-inquiry because we're doing it on a regular basis. So structure is invaluable, Carrie, and we all need it. And that's what I want this class to offer people.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I thank all for joining us. Awaken through writing, find your authentic voice, and reveal a clear vision for your future begins Thursday, October 22nd. And again, please visit awakenthroughwriting.com. I'm going to say that one more time. It's all together. Awakenthroughwriting.com to learn more about and to register. And a reminder that if you do so by midnight, October 16th, you're going to receive the special bonus of When You're Falling, Dive, an audiobook read by Mark. Oh, Mark, do you have any final words for our listeners today?
Oh, I just wish everybody well in this difficult, dangerous time. Keep your spirits up in whatever way you can. Connect with the people in your life. And think about writing as a way of gaining strength and clarity and deepening your spiritual practice, whatever it happens to be. So I do hope to see you in the course. And Carrie, thank you so much.
Oh, it's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Mark. It's such an enjoyable conversation with you. And I think everyone else, thank you for joining us today. On behalf of all of us here at the Shift Network, I wish you well, and I look forward to having you on this course or one in the future. Thank you.